Jesus smuggling on Sam to see how that would go in a discussion we had about the central archetype of superheroes. But I'm going to try something a little different tonight. I'm going to try a little direct God smuggling. We won't bother with Jesus. Let's go right to God. Why not? So one of the things I've really tried to do when I've been analyzing religious texts is to take them seriously, in the sense that I don't presume that I understand them, and I presume that they're a mystery of sorts. And at least the Bible, for example, is a mystery because we don't really understand the processes by which it was constructed, and we don't understand the processes by which we all agreed collectively over several thousand years to organize the book the way it is organized, or to edit it the way that it's edited, and to keep what's in it, and to discard what's not in it, and why it's lasted and why it's had such a huge impact.
I don't want to derail you, but yeah. We do understand the first part of the process all too well. We know that there was a political and all too human process of voting certain texts in for inclusion, and some were in for centuries and then got jettisoned, and
Sure.
And Revelation came in far later than, I mean, there were whole generations of Christians who lived and died under the banner of the Bible,
yes.
and it was a different Bible at the time. They
had
the wrong Bible. So
well, but it's the same issue that we really don't understand. Fair enough, Sam, and I'm not saying that political, etc. considerations didn't enter into it. I'm sure all human considerations entered into it, but there was some collective process of winnowing, and you can attempt to reduce that to economic or political causes, which is generally what secular assessors like Freud and Marx both did, and with a fair degree of success, I might add. But there's still some mysterious assessment of what it is that will be remembered that entered into it. But it's a separate point to some degree. I'm just saying that my point of departure when looking at these texts is one of an essential radical ignorance. I don't assume that I understand the mechanisms by which they were generated or edited or collected or kept or remembered, or why they had the impact they had. Now, I've been thinking a lot about the idea of, let's say, God the Father, because that's a very common archetypal representation of God the Father. So I'm going to tell you an experience that I had that I've never really told any audience about. I had a vision at one point and the vision had to do with a dialogue that I was having with my father. And you have a father, right? And when you're a little kid, you act out your father when you pretend to be a father. And what you're doing when you're acting out your father isn't imitating your father, because you don't duplicate precisely the actions that your father ever took in his life. What you do is you watch your father across multiple contexts, and you abstract out something like a spirit of the father. And then when you're a child, you implement that spirit of the father in your pretend play, and you come to embody that deeply. So the notion is that people can abstract out something like a spirit of the father, and that's part of our mimetic tendency, which is a very powerful human cognitive tendency. And in this vision, I first started to talk with my father, and I would say more with the spirit of my father, because he wasn't actually there. And I would say it was the wisest part of him. And then that sort of transformed into a discussion that I had with a series of ancestral spirits. And then that transformed itself into a vision of God himself, with whom I had a conversation. And this was a visionary experience. And then that all went away, and I spent months and months thinking about it. And I thought, so you guys can tell me what you think about this. And this sort of stretches my cognitive ability to its utmost limit to contemplate such things. But here's a biological argument. I already made the case that a child can extract out the spirit of the father and embody it, and that's necessary insofar as you're going to be a father and a wise one. But we can also extract out the spirit of the father over much longer periods of time, because my father was a father because he imitated his father, who imitated his father, who imitated his father, as far back in time as you can go. And there's a cumulative development of the spirit of the father across time. Now then the question might be, does this spirit of the father have any reality other than the metaphorical? And I would say, damn right it has a reality, and I can describe a biological reality, and I don't know what this says about any background metaphysics, but here's a hypothesis. We know that human beings separated from chimpanzees over the course of the last 7 million years, at least in large part because of human female sexual selectivity. So it was the spirit of femininity collectively that helped elevate us to the degree that we have been elevated above our chimpanzee co-ancestor. But here's something interesting to contemplate. What is it precisely that makes men desirable to women? And so I have a bit of a hypothesis about that. So here's what men do. They get together in productive groups, and they orient themselves toward a certain task. And they produce a hierarchy around that task, because whenever you implement a task, you produce a hierarchy. And they vote up the most competent men to the top of the hierarchy, and then the women select the competent men from the top of the hierarchy. But the vote that determines who the competent men are that are more likely to reproduce is a consequence of male evaluation of men, and that's occurred over millennia. And so there's a spirit of the father that's embedded in the patriarchal hierarchy that acts as the primary selection mechanism that offers men up to women and plays a cardinal role in human evolution. And it looks like we've personified that spirit of the father in our religious imagery. And that's how it looks to me. But then there's something that's even more mysterious and deep about that that's worth considering, is that apparently the entire course of evolutionary history has conspired to produce human beings. And we could argue that it could have been different, but it certainly hasn't been different. And that means that that selective spirit of the father has been part of the process that's generated our very being, and it's certainly possible that that collective spirit of the Father reflects something metaphysically fundamental about the structure of reality itself.
Wait, I was with you up until the last sentence, yes. Well, insofar as I agree with virtually all of that, I should say that none of that should give comfort to people who want to hold on to this notion that certain of our books might have been revealed by the creator of the universe. Right?
Well, it depends on what you mean by the creator.
Yeah. I'm just saying that the world we're living in now is one in which we have whole societies shattered over this notion that some books weren't written by human beings. Right? There's a different class of book. Right? There's a different shelf in the library where the products of almost certainly merely human brains are venerated for all time and considered uneditable and unignorable by the majority of human beings.
Yeah, well, it's clear that revelation can devolve into fundamentalism, and that's a real problem.
So there is a risk in all this always, is an often made critique, but that when you're talking about religion, you're talking about the Inquisition, you're talking about the jihadists, you're not talking about somebody who wants to go to their local Anglican church once a year, maybe get the children into school, and maybe when they're at some desolate moment of their lives returns to this as the place that stores meaning. I mean, the thing that I think Jordan and I are in agreement on in this is that thing, with a quote from Schopenhauer in the Dialogue on Religion, when he says, that truth may be like water, it needs vessels to carry it. And when we were talking about this the other night, you admitted that one of the consequences, perhaps, of the parents sort of going through the belief structures they may not believe in anymore, but they keep doing it, is a demonstration of what you said was the non-embarrassing options that atheists have come up with. But it may also be that since we don't have very many vessels, that cracked and damaged and sometimes transparent as they are, what vessels you have might be worth holding on to.
Well, no, I think the challenge here is, it feels that, well, first of all, we should first notice that these comments very often take the form of, you and I don't need this stuff, but most other people do, right? And that is,
it can do that, yeah.
Yes, that's inevitably, and it sort of took that form at one moment the other night, where you acknowledge that people of low intelligence are best placed in a conservative paradigm, a traditionally conservative paradigm, because there's less to think through, right? Now, obviously, you don't want your view on religion summarized by it's good for stupid people.
Well, I do want it summarized to some degree that way, because one of the things we do.
I'm giving you the opportunity again to put this foot in your mouth.
But I would say not only. I mean, the thing is that we're all stupid, and some of us are far stupider than others.
But we're not. But we're not that stupid. I mean,
but there's another problem, Sam. I think, and this is obviously a contentious one. And one of the things I don't go to church, but there is one thing I admire about the church, and that is that it's managed to serve as a repository for these fundamental underlying fictions for 2 millennia. And that's really something bloody unbelievable. I mean, the great, what would you say?
It is bloody unbelievable.
Well, look, Sam, everything's soaked in blood. We have no disagreement about that, but the secular alternatives that we produced in the 20th century were certainly no less blood-sodden, and they produced nothing of any productivity whatsoever.
We need not do it now, but we have to put to bed that secular canard.
What would you do?
Well, it's just not so that Stalinism was the product of secularism or atheism, and nor were
well, it was
fascism.
a product. It wasn't an inevitable product or
it's
the
not,
product.
It wasn't. And please, anyone who has this meme in your head, please just allow the next sentences I speak to just push it out, because I'm so sick of hearing this. This idea that the greatest crimes of the 20th century were somehow the product of atheism. Right. When you look at what actually engineered these atrocities, it was something that looked very much like a religion. It was a religion in every way apart from an explicit commitment to otherworldliness. It was based on
that's a big difference.
Dogmatism through and through. It was based on personality cults that grew up around figures like Stalin and Hitler and Mao. It was not the ideas of Bertrand Russell and David Hume that brought us to the Gulag or to Auschwitz.
Yes, but then you can't say it's the thought of Jesus Christ either. I mean,
well, no, it's true. No, I can say that. I can say it was the thought of St. Augustine, and I can say it was the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas explicitly that gave us the Inquisition. This is the fact.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow. Even just more fascinating discussion between the three of these intellectual giants. And what was really interesting to see the back and forth, I know it seemed like Jordan Peterson pretty much dominated, that segment with his speaking. And I think he sort of I was trying to see how he was weaving in the stuff about, the visions that he had of his father, and then the visions he had of, I believe, God, and that he was sort of intermixing that and trying to bring it to that, I think he was trying to weave that through in terms of the Christianity aspect of, God the Father, and starting off with the supposition that we all start off, perhaps, of if you're dreaming or have a vision of your father, what your father is like, and tried to metamorph that, into the God the Father thing. That's sort of at least what I took out of that. But then you saw Sam come in there basically and say, just because you have a manifestation of that kind does it really make it real? And that's sort of the juxtaposition, I think, is between these two, where Jordan Peterson tries to bring in an element of religiosity into the discussion, and Sam just always crushes it right down as soon as you hear it. There's something bad, or intuitively, intrinsically, there's something really just not percolating there, for Sam in terms of the religious argument, in terms of that. And that's, again, they're back and forth between religion versus the atheistic, outlook. Then he talked about the religious books. He said I like the way that he put this. Sam Harris said, in the libraries, there's a section of the shelves that's just there for religious books or books that are written other than humans. So obviously he's referring to either, the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quran, the Scrolls of David, the Psalms, any of the Gospels, any religious book. Could be the Ayurveda, it could be the Veda books, from Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, whatever books, scrolls, manuscripts, whatever you want to call them. He said there's a place in the library, a shelf, where all these books go to, where authors are attributed to other than human. And that's a pretty well, way put, I guess that's his way of giving us sort of a visual, of that. And so all I would say in terms of that is I think, there should be that shelf. There should be that shelf. There should be nothing wrong with that shelf at all. Now, the fact of the matter is you want to start calling it, fiction. Sam would probably say that should be on the fiction side. We who are the religious faiths would probably say, no, we should put it on the nonfiction side because we believe in that. We believe in the revelations, from God, that came. So, there's that aspect, at least, like I said, in my opinion. And then I put something else down is that, Sam, every time that you talk with atheists, Sam Harris and Hitchens and all these guys, it seems that they always like to bring up the bad things. It's like whenever you're talking to somebody about capitalism, they always try to bring up the bad things. Oh, capitalism causes racism. Capitalism, puts down the man. Capitalism, okay, subjugates its workers. Workers aren't compensated. They don't get their just due. It's all that. Same thing with religion. Religion caused so much strife, so much destruction, so much death. It just, it subjugates people. It's cult-like. They never talk about the good things of religion, like they never talk about the good things of capitalism. So that's the only problem that I have whenever Sam Harris is. I mean, what else is he going to? I mean, he does sometimes mix into the topic and brings it about only when he's forced to, it seems like. When somebody sort of counters his argument, then he'll say, well, yes, I understand what you're saying, that there are some good things, but he still won't attribute that to the religion. He'll still attribute that to the humans or humanity within the religious umbrella and say, well, that's still coming from man or from, human beings, not necessarily is that good, coming from any religion, that even if there wasn't. So he says yes, and then he just slides around basically around the back door and says, not really, or whatever. Anyways, fascinating discussion between these three. Folks, you've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already and we've earned your subscription, we'd love for you to go ahead and smash that subscription button. Like, share, and follow us. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Check out our other videos here and there and also on our website. And I'll leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.